As leader of one of the 6 races living on Ta, you will be fighting for the people's support by giving them resources, defending them from incursions, attacking monsters' hideouts, and of course, defeating your opponents. Get 5 crowns before any other race to become the true leader of Ta. Let's jump into setup. Choose one of the 4 maps and place in the center of the table. Give each player a player board with matching castle, dice, and cubes. Each player starts with 8 shield, plus 1 attack, 5 health points, 2 of each resources, and 0 crowns. Place each die on their respective place on the player boards. Shuffle the deck of quest cards and reveal 4 cards face up next to the deck. Now each player will place their castle on the board's edge, closest to themselves, in a way that all castles have the same approximate distance between themselves, pointing to the center of the board. Choose a first player, and in turn order, each player will use their tower to launch their D4, D6, and D8 onto the board. You're now ready to play. The game is played in rounds, and each round has 4 phases. Each player will do phase 1 first, then again in turn order each player completes phase 2, and so on. The 4 phases are quest board, give orders, recruit and trade, and then navigate, deploy armies, and complete quests. Before we get into those phases, let's explain the quest cards. There are 3 types of quest cards: attack, defend, and trade. The icon and color in the circle of the quest card will tell you on what terrain you need to have your castle and dice to complete the quest. The 5 terrain types on the boards are rivers, forest, mountains, neonite, and cities. The areas are also outlined in the corresponding colors. If you have an active quest next to your player board and meet their requirement at the end of your turn, you can discard it and get the reward listed on the card. Now let's take a look at them in more detail. Trade quests are simple. If your castle is in the terrain and you have the resources, you can trade them in for the reward. Pay the listed resource for the reward and discard the card. Completed quest cards go to the discard pile next to the deck. Attack quests. To complete an attack quest, you must have your castle in the terrain listed on the card and also have the dice in the same terrain area as your castle. Add the number on your dice with the bonus you get from your castle's attack value, and if you have enough to equal or pass that number needed, you defeat the enemy and complete the quest. You'll get the reward listed and discard the card. To complete a defend quest, you must have your castle in the terrain listed on the card and also have the dice in the same terrain area. Add the number on your dice with the defense value of your castle, and if you have enough to equal or pass the number needed, you defended the locals from that enemy and complete the quest. You'll get the reward listed and discard the card. Now that you understand quest cards, let's look at the phases in detail. Phase 1. Quest board. In player order, each player will take a quest or remove a quest card from the available quests. You can only have 2 active quests at any given time next to your player board. During this phase, you must choose one of the following options on your turn. Take up a face-up quest card or one from the top of the deck and place it face-up next to your player board. Or remove a quest card from the lineup and replace it with a new one from the top of the deck. You must take this action if you already have 2 quest cards next to your player board. Once all players have done this phase, we move on to phase 2. Give orders. In turn order, players now gather their dice or increase the numbers on them in the following order. First, you get 1 resource of the terrain your castle is on. If your castle is on a line, you choose which resource you get from the terrains your castle is touching. If on a city, you get 1 of your choice. Then you'll choose to gather or stay for each of your dice you have on the main board. Starting with the die with the lowest number of faces and going up, so 1d4, then 1d6, then 1d8, and so on, you need to make a choice to gather or stay for each die. If you gather with a die, we'll take a number of resources as listed in the die, depending on which terrain the die is on. That die will then be placed back in your player board to be bought again later. Increase the amount of that specific resource on your player board. If you are supposed to get more than the limit allows for a resource, you get 1 of the next resource on the resource line below. For example, if you have 3 fish and gather 6 fish, you can move up to 5 fish and gain 1 wood as well. If the die is on a line or touching more regions, you can split the resources you gather. If you gather a die from a city, you get one resource of your choosing, regardless of the number on the die. If you decide to stay on the board, leave the die but turn it to its next number. This is risky because other players might knock your die into another terrain, another number, or even off the board. Once all players have gathered or stayed, we move on to Phase 3. Recruit and Trade In. Here you will recruit population dice using your resources and buy a crown if you have 3 of each resource. This phase of the game can be done by all players at the same time to save time or in turn order if you choose. The box at the top of the player board is your population area. We call it the active dice area. To add a die to your population, you need to spend resources matching the die you want to buy. The cost is the number in the circle next to the die you want to buy. For example, if you want to buy a D8, you need to spend 3 stones. When purchased, move that die to your population box. The 4-sided die is always free and always available, so you don't need to pay to recruit it. All dice can be used to gather or attack except the 20-sided die. It can only be used to perform attacks. Finally, you can also trade in 3 of each resource you own for 1 crown during this phase. Once all players have recruited their dice and bought crowns, we move on to the final phase. Navigate and take actions. In player order, you can move your tower or rotate your tower, then take actions. If you choose to move your tower, you can slide a few inches in any direction, making sure not to rotate while doing so. If you want to move a maximum distance, you can use the movement stick. Place one end of the stick against the base of your tower and slide it along, as long as you're still touching the stick at the end of your move. Note that the stick is not always needed if you're only moving a couple of inches. If you like your spot, you can instead rotate your tower to face any direction, keeping it on the same location. You must be at least 1 inch away from other towers at any given time, or enough space for a d20 to pass between towers. After moving or rotating, you can deploy your active dice from your population onto the board. Here, you can deploy any number of active dice you have in your population box using your tower. You will choose the die and drop it in the upper hole of the tower and make it slide down onto the board. Now, let's talk about attacking since we're launching dice. During this phase, you can also use your dice to attack other towers, but can only attempt 1 attack per turn. Declare which die or dice are attackers. You'll launch the dice using your tower. If the dice touch another player's tower, they have considered to have attacked that tower. Total the number of each attacking dice that touched another tower and add it to your castle's attack bonus. If the total is equal or higher than the defender's tower defense value, then the attack is successful. Also, you can hit more than 1 tower with each die, which also counts as a trick shot, which I'll explain later. If you did successfully attack, you'll remove all dice that hit another tower. The defender loses 1 health and you gain 1 crown. Also important, after an attack, whether successful or not, the attacker will raise his attack value by 1 and the defending player his defense by 1. Think of this as experience gained. The dice that were declared as attacking but did not touch any other towers will stay on the board for gathering later on, except for d20s, since it's always returned to the player's board when used, as it can't even gather. The dice that did touch the defending towers are returned to the player's board for later purchasing. If you do not declare which dice are attacking dice, and they do touch another player's tower, nothing happens to both you or that player. So make sure other players know which dice are attacking and which are not. Basically, you're telling the other players whether you're sending out soldiers or farmers. Once you've deployed your dice, your turn ends and the next player takes theirs. At the end of this phase, start a new round and keep expanding your castle until a player reaches 5 crowns and become the true ruler of Ta. Now for the trick shots. You can also attack 2 or more towers in 1 declared attack. If opponents' towers are close to each other, you can bounce your attack dice off onto them to hit the other. If you do, your attack is calculated as normal against each of the opponent's defense, and you win a crown for each successful attack. Not to mention, you get to scream in victory and gain bragging rights. Also, on a final note, team play is possible as well if playing at 4 or 6 players. We hope this video has showed you how to play your copy of Tower Wars or incited you into looking into getting yourself a copy. Thanks for watching, and thanks for continued support here at Bored to Death Reviews. Subscribe to the channel to see more videos like these coming soon.